let's talk spousal maintenance. This is a question we get a lot about in the divorce world, and I think there are five big things that I think everybody should know about spousal maintenance, and we can spend some time kind of covering what I think those big things are, and also talk about um like some stories we've seen and some common trends in spousal maintenance. So I'm Taylor Kaspar. I'm owner and managing attorney of the Wins Law Firm, where we help women navigating divorce walk through the process confidently so they can get everything they're entitled to.
I'm Rachel Kennedy. I'm the founder and principal mediator at Rachel Kennedy Mediation, and we are Minnesota's home for compassionate divorce.
I love that. I think the world needs a little bit more compassion than you sometimes see in this industry.
Yes.
So spousal maintenance is a big deal. That's where we see courts award an actual payment from one spouse to another spouse if one is a high earner versus somebody who maybe doesn't earn enough. And we see it awarded typically when there's either not enough property that the lower earner or the person requesting spousal maintenance has to get them to a place where they can live comfortably and get to that standard of living that they had during the marriage. So either they don't have enough property, or if they don't have enough income to adequately provide for their own self-support. And again, that is self-support at the level that they attain during the marriage. So that's probably the big definition, I guess, of spousal maintenance. Do you think that's pretty accurate?
Yeah, I think so. That's what I see.
Yeah.
That's what people are trying to do.
And I know that we've been talking a lot about how there have been some changes in the law that came down. The legislature entered some changes to the statute that went into effect on August 1st of 2024 that changed some of the lingo about spousal maintenance. So we typically hear spousal maintenance referred to as alimony. That's kind of an outdated term, but if you hear alimony, it's the same thing as spousal maintenance, also called spousal support. And then one of the other big changes in terminology that have happened over the years, but specifically with this August 1st update to the legislature, is we went from temporary and permanent spousal maintenance to transitional spousal maintenance, right? The maintenance is going to help you transition from the marriage to whatever that next chapter in your life is. And then we have now indefinite maintenance, which is the newer term, the updated term for, once again, permanency. So those are some big changes that have come about. Along with that, the legislature has given us a little bit of guidance about how do we know when somebody should get spousal maintenance. Before how we get into like, how do we know? I guess, what do you see, Rachel, when people come to you asking for spousal maintenance? Are there any trends that you're seeing that bring people to the door wanting to know about this exchange?
Yeah, I would say, honestly, percentage wise, like not a ton of my clients are requesting it because typically they're either fairly similar earners or that's compensated as much as they feel it needs to be with child support. And so they're okay. Two spousal support cases I've seen recently were not trends. I guess they were very opposite ends of the spectrum, but they were both really interesting cases. One, well, in both cases, the wife had been a stay-at-home parent and the husband had, had a more successful career. In one, the husband was a fairly low earner too. And so they were in a position where they were trying to count pennies to try to figure out how to support two households instead of one. And so she was asking for spousal maintenance. And he was like, yeah, I for sure, like, I understand, I owe that, I wanna support you and the kids, but we got these spreadsheets and the numbers are just not working out with what you're looking for. So we're gonna need to talk through this. And then the other case is she's a low earner, he's a very high earner. So they've got this whole lifestyle that they've built that's very important to them with their kids, with mom being available most of the time, and they take lavish vacations and they've got this huge house that mom and kids still want to live in. And so they're trying to figure that out. But the interesting part in that is that a pretty significant amount of dad's income, probably close to half, is some combination of commissions and quarterly bonuses and stock options and things like that. And so, you've got one case where there's already barely enough money to go around and they're just trying to figure out how to split it up. And then the other case where they've built this very successful lifestyle together and they're trying to figure out, like, how can we still have our family, now living in two different places, both have this lifestyle that's become important to us.
Ooh, yeah, that's really interesting. So you hit on a couple of big things there that I think we're gonna talk about when we talk about some of the other facts that people should know. And that is the reality of things. You
Mhm.
definitely hit on that, right?
Mhm.
Talking about we don't quite have enough money to go around,
Mhm.
but like now we have to split it up, and one person thinks that they're gonna get more than is available because it's the money's just not there. The other thing that you hit on is the standard of living, right? They've built this life up and they take these vacations and they have this house and all of these things. And we're going to talk about their maintaining that in just a minute. I'm curious, the people that you're working with and seeing, how long were they married when they were talking about the spousal?
Actually, both cases were pretty much exactly 20 years, which I know is very relevant in the different types of maintenance you were just talking about.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So that's a huge thing when we're coming up to like, how do you know if you're gonna get maintenance? There's a presumption in the law that if you've been married less than 5 years, that nobody's entitled to maintenance. That's a short-term marriage. You have plenty of time to go out and make your earnings and do your thing. So less than 5 years, the presumption is nobody pays anybody. 5 years to 20 years is that in between bucket. 15 years is a long time. So I kind of think 5 to 20 is a little bit controversial, but that's what the law tells us right now.
Mhm.
And 5 to 20 is that indefinite maintenance, or sorry, excuse me. I'll have to edit that out. 5 to 20 is that transitional maintenance
Mhm.
where it is for a limited duration of time. And what the statute tells us is it's going to be limited to 1/2 the length of the marriage. So if you're married for 15 years, you're going to have a presumption that you can get transitional maintenance for 7.5.
Mhm.
Because that's what
That's
somebody at the legislature knows, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
great, that sounds great. And then if you're 20 years or more, that's the indefinite maintenance, that long-term permanency award. That award is going to be determined based upon the standard of living that was attained during the marriage. So your couple that you're talking about, where mom's been available, she's the stay-at-home parent, they've got this lavish lifestyle and the house, and the kids can do the lavish vacations and all the
Mhm.
things. That's what her attorney, or well, not, because they're choosing to do the compassionate divorce route and to
Mhm.
work through it collaboratively with you.
Mhm.
That's what but if we take it and say we went before a court, or just as people are thinking about this and discussing this just amongst themselves, that's what you're looking at.
Mhm.
Is like, okay, well, what is it that we have right now? I'm obviously not gonna go above that if we're getting a divorce, because now we have money that needs to be split more, into two households or whatever.
Mhm.
But we're looking at how do we get people as close as possible to that same level of comfortability that they had and enjoyed during the marriage.
Right.
The legislature, though, is very clear that that is the actual standard of living that was attained, not the standard of living that was attained by accumulation of debt.
Right.
Right? Do
Yeah.
you see that where people are
Yeah.
like, we have all these things, but everything's like mortgaged, they're all mortgaged up to their eyeballs and everything's encumbered.
Or they're talking about the stock options, and we've got one person saying, but that's just kind of an option, like that's not actual income. But then the other person is saying, yes, I understand what you're saying, but in our marriage, we always used those options to fund, the upgrades on the house and the vacations and that kind of stuff. And so we're still working through that. There's definitely conversation to be had in that case, but that's one of the things they're talking about is like, is this really income? Not really, but we did use it as income during the marriage. So how are we going to address that
Ooh,
post-marriage?
That hits on a lot of things too, because now, which is maybe even a video for another time, but now we're getting into like, are we commingling assets? Because there's a lot of times too where people, this is non-marital property.
Mhm.
I shouldn't have to divide.
Actually, they've been talking about that too.
Yeah.
Like our future stock options, still marital property is what they were kind of talking through and trying to work through and.
Looking through that. And we gotta look at, to that person's point, we have to look at the history of the matter.
Mhm.
Like if we attain this standard of living using stock options, then arguably, right? Like you see how people can play both sides of that.
Yep.
Because arguably then, well, you are treating that as income, and isn't it income under the IRS's definition or, the family court's definition, if it's money that's coming in that's being used to fund things going forward.
Right.
So there's that. I've had some interesting ones too with spousal maintenance where we had an inheritance situation where the inheritance was coming in, it was a trust, and the trust was paying out, I think the trust was irrevocable, and it was paying dividends to the children like now over time, even though these parents were still living. And as the money was coming in, the kids were using it to fund their lifestyle. So then the spouse in this divorce, they're separating, and the spouse is like, that's income.
Yeah.
That's not your non-marital,
Yeah.
like that's
Yeah.
not your cute non-marital, whatever. It's income because it has to come to you. Means the IRS's definition of income. And then we've been
using it to pay the mortgage or get
to
groceries or
things.
take the trip.
Put the kid on this elite soccer team
Yeah.
that costs $5,000 a season and they're 12. Like,
Yeah.
so that's
Yeah.
definitely right. Like you could push for that all day, that's income.
Mhm.
So that's a huge thing.
So when you're thinking about the more, what's permanent, but indefinite.
Indefinite,
Yeah, the one person who's gonna be responsible for paying spousal support was like, okay, number one, is that still indefinite if the person receiving the support gets remarried? And number two, am I still responsible for the same amount when I'm in retirement and I don't necessarily have the same income? Those were two questions that we were wrestling with just the other day, actually.
Oh my gosh, that was fact number 5. How long do people get spousal maintenance in an indefinite situation, or like what can terminate?
Yeah.
Spousal. So good. Okay, so Minnesota has a statute and a law that says how maintenance terminates for 2 specific reasons, right? Remarriage and cohabitation
Okay.
of the person receiving maintenance. So we have a statute about that. So if I get a divorce and I'm receiving maintenance and I go move in with my boyfriend, well, now we're cohabiting. And so my ex-spouse, who's the obligor on these payments, can stop paying. I do believe you have to motion the court. I don't think you just stop paying, but you can motion the court, right? This is cohabitation. They have somebody else supporting and helping them meet their needs. Like I'm not on the hook for this anymore. And that statute, since I came in practice, so it's fairly new, I guess, but we've been working on that for quite some time. Now, that's something too that people need to look at and settle when we're talking about retirement. Well, let me back up. Cohabitation, remarriage, but then there are a couple of other things. I'll get to retirement in a second. What happens when somebody dies? Right?
Yeah.
So if you're on the hook for transitional maintenance for 7.5 years and 1 year in you die, is your estate on the hook for that maintenance? And
That's a really great question for a family law and estate.
and the answer is it depends, right? It depends. Then you want to be really clear on that. Some recommendations I give clients in divorce are like insure against these things.
Right.
An easy way you can insure against it is in the decree, you can go ahead and say, we're both going to carry life insurance and that's going to cover loss of child support, loss of maintenance. You can write it in the decree that the estate would be on the hook. There are things that you can do to insure against that because, stranger things have happened. I've definitely had people die during divorce proceedings, during their estate planning process, or very shortly thereafter. So, nothing, tomorrow's not promised. Right. So we don't know. So you can insure against that. The other thing I would say is with retirement, you definitely want to go speak with maybe somebody who handles qualified retirement plans or a financial advisor to get really good sound advice about it. But what I can tell you is that you want to know if your income is going to go down dramatically in retirement if you're paying indefinite maintenance, because if you're paying $6,000 a month and your income goes down 50%, that's not going to be a comfortable payment for you anymore. Right?
Right. Yeah.
Or maybe what we want to do is maybe we want to negotiate the indefinite goes up to retirement, and then at retirement the person who's receiving the maintenance can get the ex-spouse's social security on their earning record. Do be careful, there are marriage laws with that about who can be remarried and those things, but maybe the spouse receiving can go out and get social security on the earning record of the obligor spouse who was paying. Or maybe we could do some shifting of retirement assets and there's your income right there. Because instead of continuing to actually make that payment, if you get a big chunk of retirement assets, that will provide income for the spouse who needs it. post-retirement. So you do have options. There's lots to consider and to try to figure out as you're walking through maintenance. That's a heavy topic. Let us know in the comments if you have specific questions about it. We would love to answer them. We'd love to do a spin-off video or maybe make this a series, because this is something I'm seeing more and more and more, especially with the way the economy is gone.
And I'm thinking especially with the new laws too, it's like, before that, I think a lot of us were like, okay, this is gonna get a lot more clear, and then it got like a little more
murkier.
clear, and we're like, okay, but it's still really murky, this is hard to figure out.
Right.
So, yeah,
Right.
it's definitely something I think we all need to be discussing and helping our clients figure out.
Yeah, I think too, in the age of the entrepreneur, the gig economy, and the content creator, we're gonna see some people blow up some money
Yeah,
and create a lifestyle where we're mostly remote and we're staying at home and we're doing these things, and now we have this split, and like one party's not getting any of the YouTube proceeds anymore. You know, like what are we gonna do?
Yeah.
So I think it's gonna come up, but yeah, definitely go ahead and give this video a like. Let us know in the comments if you have anything else you want to know about it, or other topics that we can cover for you that would be important to you. And then of course subscribe to my channel, and we'll see you next time.
so yeah.